Hello, everybody, and we're back again after a little bit of a break in the videos, but we're here today and we're doing more rankings. Kind of a slow news cycle again, Vish. So, I guess rankings are really fun, and it's kind of funny too because PFF's been just spamming lists.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is, but they are just spamming lists. It's weird. But yeah, so we're gonna do underrated quarterbacks, so guys that we think are really good that just don't get talked about enough, and then we're gonna do our top 5 receiver duos, which is really hard to honestly do, just because there's so many good options. But Vish, are you excited for this or what?
Yeah, I'm really excited for it. So before we start, two things. One, shout out to my man
Yeah,
B
thank
Money.
you.
I really appreciate this. This is so nice of you. And I've been in correspondence with my man B Money just very recently. This is a very, very nice guy, very, very generous guy. I truly appreciate you, man. You're a very nice guy, and we really appreciate the support. It means a lot. And then two, so Blake kind of touched on it. We're doing an underrated quarterback segment. Obviously, since content's a little slow right now, we're introducing a new thing to our channel where we're going to kind of go position by position and name players who we believe are underrated. So today we're going to do the quarterbacks. Next time we stream, we'll do some running backs, we'll do some receivers, we'll do tight ends, and we'll just go down the list of every single position, trying to shout out just players that we feel when you go back and watch and look at their season, they deserve more credit than they're getting. And so we hope to do that. I mean, I'm still kind of stunned. B Money, you're too kind. We really appreciate the support.
Definitely. So we can get into the first bit here. Most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. So kind of like Vish said, we're hoping to do this as a series where we just go position by position, offense and defense. We don't know if we'll do the O lines. That'd be interesting, but we'll see, just to get some names out there. But Vish, who did you have as a quarterback who's maybe not talked about enough, slandered too hard, or just generally underrated by the media, fans, and NFL?
I'm going to go with Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield went from a guy who was maybe a little overrated after his rookie season, when people were already calling him a top 10 to 12 quarterback in the NFL. Like, he had a really good rookie season, but he did have some flaws. And after Freddie Kitchens, everybody's just ready to give up on him. I think Baker Mayfield's the most underrated quarterback in the NFL. I thought he had a really good season last year. I mean, if you look at his season, it started off a little slow. Obviously, he was adjusting to Kevin Stefanski's offense, not awesome. And then they had that kind of lull period where they threw the ball like less than 15 times in like 2 or 3 different games because the weather was terrible. And people looked at the box score and said, see, they don't believe in Baker Mayfield, blah, blah, blah. And then after that, Baker Mayfield was unbelievable down the stretch of the season. Baker Mayfield really, really played like a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. And I think he's a top 15 quarterback in the NFL. And if anybody's listened to us, which we appreciate everybody who has, one of the things I've been kind of stating is that I believe the Cleveland Browns are the best team in the AFC after this offseason. I think that they're going to go to the Super Bowl. They remind me of the 2019 49ers and the 2018 Rams, but I've said that they have a better quarterback than both those teams. And I do believe Baker Mayfield's a better quarterback than both those guys, and Jimmy Garoppolo, Jared Goff. He's got a really strong arm. He's really accurate. I think Baker Mayfield's the most underrated quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, I like the Baker pick, and I think the perception of him in the beginning of the season, and I was one of the guys, I wasn't on the Browns. I wasn't a big fan of them. I kind of thought they were overrated. It was, I think, our first video, and I was like, I think the Browns are maybe a little overhyped, and it kind of had to do with me not thinking Baker was as good as he really is. And throughout the season, you saw the progression, and there was a lot of fixable mistakes that I think were very evident in his game. But, as it progressed, he started cutting out the bad interceptions and improving just, with, where he's going with the ball, just having a good run offense. So I think he's honestly one of the most improved quarterbacks during this season, and it was very, very evident. And then I thought the Ravens game was just a perfect kind of display.
Summation.
Yeah, just their defense obviously got killed. They allowed a lot of points, but he just kept coming back drive after drive, and oh man, it was awesome to watch. And then the other thing too, I know a lot of people compare him to Johnny Manziel. I mean, if you see their arms and anything that's not familiar, maybe the off the field stuff you could say, but Johnny Manziel has, he has addiction problems, and it's very sad, and that's definitely harping on him or hurting him, and playing football. But Baker never had that. He was drunk in college and made a mistake, and I don't think should be something that people just write him off for that, because he's like 20 years old. It happens. So I'm excited to see what they do this year. They've set him up in a perfect position. I think that's something that needs to be stated. Great head coach, best O-line, amazing run game. The receivers are pretty good, but we'll see what happens when Odell comes back, and if that connection can get started, because if it does, that's where I think that he can really start to put them on the map and people talk about him more.
And the crazy thing is, like, I think for whatever reason it hasn't clicked, but if you remember, Baker Mayfield was throwing bombs to like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Rashard Higgins. And obviously Baker has a really strong arm, and he's a really accurate down the field thrower. Two things that not every quarterback in the NFL has, and those are the things that I think make him, more enticing than a lot of the guys who played in the same system as him. But like, imagine if the receiver on the end of those bombs was Odell Beckham Jr. For whatever reason, they haven't really connected. He did have that amazing throw rolling out to his left that he just ripped a 40-yard ball, if you remember, week 2 against Cincinnati on Thursday night to Odell Beckham.
Yeah.
And Odell Beckham slid into the end zone and got called down at the 1. But Odell, I agree with you. I think Odell is going to help Baker a lot. I just think overall Baker just doesn't get the respect he deserves, because people like Colin Cowherd just hate on him on the regular and all of that. And then their second, right, and then the second season, the Browns weren't what they were expected to be. But if you go back and look, Freddie Kitchens' offense was terrible. It was terrible. And I don't expect how anyone could have expected Baker Mayfield to succeed in that offense. No quarterback would have succeeded in the offense. Number 2, and I think this is kind of a flaw with Baker, maybe, but I don't think it's a reason not to call him one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. It's that he needs real good protection to succeed. And I think that has a little bit to do with his physical limitations in terms of his size and everything. Like, the protection he received the year with Freddie Kitchens was terrible. Their offensive line was terrible. They had just lost Zeitler, obviously, to get Odell. And, their interior offensive line, while it was excellent last year with Bitonio and J.C. Treader, they started Greg Robinson at left tackle. That's a problem. And getting Jedrick Wills, getting Jack Conklin, their offensive line was fantastic last year. And Baker Mayfield having a little protection in front of him, he played great. Like, if he gets protected, Baker Mayfield can go out and just sling it. Baker Mayfield's got a rocket for an arm. And so it's so underrated how strong his arm is. I feel like every game, because you hear people on TV, or you turn on TV when they're talking about Baker Mayfield, they go, not that big, not that strong of an arm. I don't get the not that strong of an arm. Baker Mayfield has it's a rocket. And he throws the ball hard, and I think he's the most underrated quarterback in the NFL. I mean, there's a lot of guys I think that fit that criteria. You could make an argument, B Money brought up Matt Ryan, and we'll touch on him real quick when we touch on that question. He's definitely underrated. I've always made the case for Matthew Stafford, though. I think going to LA, just making that trade has started to make Matthew Stafford get the respect he deserves. Right.
More.
Kirk Cousins is a guy that's always around this conversation. I think Derek Carr is a guy that's around this conversation. But Baker Mayfield is 24, 25 years old. He's at this point, I think we should be looking at him as one of the better quarterbacks over the next 4 or 5 years in the NFL, especially when you look at Stefanski and you look at what the Browns have building, because Andrew Barry's an incredible GM.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing more you want to see out of him is, we've seen him if they have to throw the ball and they're in situations where it's like, they're down by a lot and they need to throw, like, he's able to do that. He's been in those situations. I guess the only thing now we're kind of waiting for is doing it in the playoffs consistently. He only got that last year was his first year. Overall, I thought he played really well. Obviously against the Steelers, it was pretty, he didn't even really need to play because they self-destructed. But I thought he did pretty solid against the Chiefs in the second half. Definitely could have made some more plays maybe. They didn't score a crazy amount, but it was their first time in the playoffs, so you can't really harp on it too bad. But I think that's where, if he does start, if you want him to get more respect, that's where it's going to come from. Because in the regular season, we've seen what they just did. And I think we both anticipate this regular season, they're going to be one of the 3 best 4 teams in the league. But can he do that in the postseason when he's playing the best of the best? The lights are the brightest and all that stuff.
I agree with that. And I actually think that one thing that I hope the Browns do is they get their tight ends more involved. I think they have 3 really good tight ends. And I'm a big fan of Harrison Bryant. I told you, I don't know if we said this on here, but I said that he reminds me of George Kittle. And I think that Harrison Bryant is going to break out and be the best tight end on that team next year. And he's better. And Austin Hooper's a good player, and Njoku, inconsistent hands, but he's a good blocker and a solid all-around player. But I hope that they continue to get their tight ends involved more because, I think that their offense is just better suited to get the ball to their tight ends, even if you have Odell, even if you have Jarvis Landry. And Baker Mayfield, since his college days, has been one of the best middle-of-the-field throwers in the NFL. And you use those tight ends just a little bit more with Harrison Bryant in the pass game and Austin Hooper in the pass game. I think that Baker Mayfield will kill it next year.
Yeah, I think their offense is perfect for only using even 2 receivers, whether that's, if Odell's still injured, Higgins, and because Landry's really solid as a number. I think he's the perfect number 2, just blocking and doing all the little stuff. But they only need to throw out 2 receivers because if they could go 2 receivers, 2 tight ends, and obviously Chubb or Hunt because they have the best backfield in the whole league, which is crazy. So yeah, their offense is going to be explosive, and I think year 2 in Stefanski's scheme is going to help too, because I think with LaFleur, you saw how much that got better from year 1 to 2. And now they have Baker's having the same head coach there for another offseason, and he hasn't had that because he started with Hugh Jackson. And then somehow he went to Freddie Kitchens.
Greg Williams, then Freddie Kitchens.
Yeah. Greg Williams was interim, though, wasn't he?
Yeah.
But that is just you think of having 3 head coaches, and those are 3 that you would not like to have. But Stefanski's obviously been incredible, and interesting to see how he does this year. And, maybe – I don't know if he'd be an MVP guy just because of the team they have, but they have the potential if he puts up the stats because their record's going to be good. So
I think he's going to be the guy that you look at all the efficiency stats, he's going to have a 34 touchdown, 7 interception season. Mm-hmm. And you're going to look through all the stats and he's going to check every box. But the thing that's going to hold them back is that they're just going to play great all-around football. Yeah. And, it won't be a Matt Ryan 2016 season. It might be like Ryan Tannehill's season last year. I think Ryan Tannehill was 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions last year. And he just wasn't in the MVP conversation because his running back was. And I think that might happen to Baker Mayfield. His running back might end up being in the MVP conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
In Nick Chubb. But he's going to have a hell of a season, in my opinion.
Definitely. So we had, you had Baker as yours. Mine was actually a guy you just mentioned, Ryan Tannehill. And I think he's actually been getting a lot more praise recently. So obviously, the Titans traded for Julio Jones. He has Julio Jones and A.J. Brown right now. Maybe the best receiver duo in the league. We'll see. We'll debate that in a little bit. But I think he's been heavily underrated. So obviously, he started his career with the Dolphins, made the playoffs once off the back of Jay Ajayi just being an absolute monster that season, and him being a solid quarterback. And then he fizzled out there. He gets traded to the Titans, and he was the backup to Mariota, and they're 500 halfway through the year. He comes in, and they make the playoffs, and this was all in 2019. And they made a deep run. They went to the AFC Championship game, lost to the Chiefs, but he was the main reason that their team went from average to over the hump. Now, their offense is mainly predicated on Derrick Henry. That's matter of fact, but going the jump from Mariota to Tannehill it's night and day. He was significantly better, and the main reason they did make the jump from like an average team to an above average team. And then I think you kind of mentioned it with Baker, but the efficiency with Tannehill. So obviously, as I mentioned, they do a lot of stuff with, play action, and that's their main bit of the passing game. Their schemes: hand the ball to Derrick Henry, have him do his thing because he's one of the best running backs, and then go play action off of that and have people run deep crossers. And I think the fact that Julio said he wants to go to a team that has a quarterback who can unload the deep ball, and then he's going to the Titans is just makes so much sense, because imagine a play action where you have A.J. Brown, running across the middle, and then, going past your safety is going to be Julio Jones. So that's wild. It's going to be fun to watch this season. But, yeah, I'm big on Tannehill, and the whole efficiency thing is where you see it in how accurate he is, because his efficiency stats are among the best.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think he's wildly underrated. And I really saw this when Julio first got traded. I tweeted this out because I saw a lot of people on Twitter saying, oh, Julio wanted to go to a down the field passing offense, and then he goes to Tennessee. Well, they have one of the best down the field throwers in the NFL in Ryan Tannehill. He is so accurate throwing down the field. And everyone says, yeah, their offense is predicated on Derrick Henry. But guess what? When they do throw the ball, because they have Derrick Henry, they're throwing the ball down the field. It's play action, and they're throwing the ball 15, 20 yards down the field. And Ryan Tannehill is so accurate ripping crossers, as you mentioned, to A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. He has an incredible deep ball. I think it was versus Jacksonville last year when he uncorked like a 60-yard bomb.
It was 60-something, to A.J. Brown.
A.J. Brown in stride, as good of a throw as you'll see. One that if, a Josh Allen or a Mahomes made, it would be trending through Twitter because of given the situation. That was late in the game against a team they probably should have beat, yes, but it was a close ball game, and they won that game because Ryan Tannehill made a ridiculous throw. And so I think that Ryan Tannehill is easily one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL. I think he's a top 10, top 11 quarterback in the NFL, to be honest with you. I think that his perception gets hurt a little bit by his Miami days. But the funny thing about his Miami days is that he was actually good in Miami. Nobody gave Adam Gase the flack that they gave when Sam Darnold was with Adam Gase. But Ryan Tannehill and Adam Gase made the playoffs together, and then he partially tore his ACL. They didn't let him have surgery. And then he fully tore his ACL, didn't trust his health. Miko Grimes was constantly tweeting about Ryan Tannehill being bad. So the perception surrounding him was that he was bad, but he was a really solid player in Miami. And then you put him into a situation that suits him in Tennessee, and he turns from a solid player to a really, really, really good one. And so I never understood the conversation around Ryan Tannehill, to be honest. Miami thought so highly of him. They paid him like a franchise quarterback. Ryan Tannehill's contract was one of the bigger talking points in the NFL in 2015 and 2016 and 2017. People were like, wow, you paid Ryan Tannehill that much? But now looking back, they should have paid Ryan Tannehill that much, and they should have never gotten rid of him. He's a really good quarterback. I 100% agree with you. I think he's wildly underrated, and I think that we're going to see him have another great season with Julio Jones and A.J. Brown next season.
And I think you brought it up too with the perception of him, because everyone just looks at the Titans. They're like, oh, this is Derrick Henry's team. That's the only reason they are good. And that could not be farther from the truth. I mean, obviously Mariota is not a starting quarterback in the league anymore, but he's one of the highly sought after backups. And that you could have a worse quarterback situation, I guess is what I'm saying here. And they were a 500 team, and their offense wasn't running as efficiently. And I guess that's where I would say being able to pass the ball as well as they were with Tannehill helps Derrick Henry a ton, just as much as Derrick Henry's rushing ability helps set up the play action for Tannehill. So it's a, give and take on both ends, and they both help each other a lot. So, I think that perception is hurting him. The only thing, I guess, with me that I guess maybe he's hurting his perception also that I can't argue against is in the playoffs and what he really did, I guess. So 2019 against New England, he only had 15 pass attempts and 72 yards. And then the next week against Baltimore, when they won by a lot, they were up the whole game, but he only had 14 pass attempts for 88 yards. So that's where you kind of think, okay. He just hasn't really done it in the playoffs yet, and I don't know if it's fair to like hold that against him, but that I think is another reason why maybe you don't hear him talked about as much as some of the other quarterbacks because he really hasn't done anything crazy. I mean, his most passing yards is 209 against the Chiefs, and then last year he had 165. So you really struggle to argue for him in that sense. But overall, I still think he's very underrated, and I guess same with Baker. He needs to do it in the playoffs to get more respect from others.
I think the playoff thing is fair. The one thing I'll say about the playoffs is that I think that Arthur Smith is a little overrated from the standpoint of he has a good scheme, but it's a it's a little more simplistic outside of the red zone in the sense that they have 2 or 3 very, very standard plays that they consistently go to, whether it's their run game with Derrick Henry, which is really just they go to one run, which is the inside zone with this split action. And then they have Ryan Tannehill obviously off play action, and they use a concept that's a go and a crosser, and they constantly do that. And Derrick Henry sucks up the linebackers, and Ryan Tannehill is really accurate. But I think that here's my biggest thing with the Ryan Tannehill conversation with Derrick Henry, like you mentioned. Derrick Henry averages like half a yard more per carry when Ryan Tannehill is under center compared to Mariota. So like Derrick Henry went from a guy who was a good running back, who was a limited running back. If you remember, the perception of him surrounding Mariota was like, yeah, he's a pretty good runner, but he gives you nothing as a receiver and all of that. You insert Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, and now Derrick Henry's an MVP candidate. So it goes both ways. Obviously, Derrick Henry is an elite player and one of the best running backs in the NFL, but Ryan Tannehill is also a really, really good quarterback. That's why they're able to help each other out, just like you mentioned. And I think the playoff thing is fair. I think it'll eventually get better.
Yeah,
I think one of the things that hurt him, especially last year, was that they weren't a team built to drop back in the pass game. No. Obviously, Isaiah Wilson, losing Jack Conklin hurt. Isaiah Wilson was a bust. Taylor Lewan was hurt last year. So their offensive line wasn't great in pass protection. They were a decent run blocking offensive line. Obviously, Roger Southhold is a mauler, but they weren't great in pass protection. They only had 2 receivers that you can really rely on, of which Corey Davis is a really, really good player. But A.J. Brown, to me, is the only guy that you could have looked at on that team and said he's going to consistently win against man coverage. So that hurt them in the drop back pass game. And then finally, I just felt like schematically, like they didn't do the best job in the drop back pass game. So I think all of those things will improve gradually as the Titans get better. Obviously, Julio is going to help that a lot. Taylor Lewan coming back is going to help that out a lot. And then A.J. Brown because he played with 2 sprains. He played with injuries on both his legs. Yeah. Last year, and him being healthy, I mean, he was a monster last year, so him being healthy will help that too.
Yeah, and this will be a huge year for him because I don't really think there's much excuses. I guess I think the pass protection thing, I'm glad you brought that up because that was something that their offensive line isn't the best at pass protection. It's kind of similar in a sense to like it's not as bad as the Vikings, but it's similar in the sense that they're a lot better at run blocking than pass blocking. And I mean, even watching the Packers game, the pocket was just, I mean, it would just collapse very, very quickly. So he'd have to get the ball out, and he played a poor game, but that'll happen if you're got a bunch of dudes in your face trying to kill you. So it'll happen. But yeah, I guess bottom line is I think Tannehill's very underrated, and this season he'll definitely prove it. And he had a big upgrade at receiver, so he has Julio and A.J. Brown, which is going to be insane, and hopefully some more health on the offensive line this year. But yeah, that is the most underrated quarterback. So again, I said Tannehill. Vish had Mayfield.
Yep. And then before we move on, my man B Money says, what about Matt Ryan? He gets respect, but he doesn't get all the respect he deserves. Plus, he has the Super Bowl loss hanging over him.
I agree with this one. I can go first. And I think here's the thing that I think irks me the most about the Matt Ryan situation. And yes, he had the MVP year. The following year, his statistically, he was nearly the exact same, but like nobody cared because I guess a lot of it you could argue was in garbage time, and their team was not good really at all. But I still think he's been criminally underrated. And the thing that irks me the most is when people say he has Julio Jones. It's like people would, I guess, say that having Julio Jones makes him good when that could not be true. Now, he has had really, really good receivers. He's had Roddy White, Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley. But he is still just such an incredible quarterback. And I think the accuracy's there. Maybe throws too many picks, I think, is a complaint some people would have. But I think he's really good. And, that 2016 season when they were running the ball with Coleman and Freeman and then passing with Sanu, Jones, and they had Shanahan there, that was a special season. And really just I think he's still underrated. And I still think you could win a championship with Matt Ryan, undoubtedly.
I 100% agree. I think he's very underrated. I don't think you can just win a championship with him. I think he's a borderline Hall of Famer. And like the Julio Jones argument that you brought up, that's stupid because he was a Pro Bowler before Julio Jones even got drafted. He also won Rookie of the Year before Julio Jones got drafted. So he was a good quarterback starting off. The Shanahan argument, while it's fair and it helped him get the MVP, you brought up the 2 seasons later with Sarkisian, he put up essentially the same season, but they went 7-9 because their defense was injured and it wasn't that good. Their offensive line was terrible. And, they didn't have Sanu and Taylor Gabriel and Shanahan calling the plays. They had really Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, and Calvin Ridley wasn't the guy he was last year. He was still, he was a rookie player at the time. So I 100% agree with that. And 3, here's the thing that always gets me. If you remember when Mac Jones was coming out of the draft, a lot of people who really liked Mac Jones compared him to Matt Ryan, and they gave that as a reason why the Niners would draft him. Now, those were wrong, but one of the things that really irked me was that a lot of people would immediately say they don't want Mac Jones to beat Matt Ryan, as if they don't want a guy who started in the NFL. Yeah, who's been a top 10 quarterback for the last 14 years, started in the NFL for 14 straight years, been a borderline Hall of Famer. And that one made me laugh because I was thinking to myself, not just forget Mac Jones, if Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, if any of them have 80% of the career Matt Ryan has, they're wild successes. Definitely. Being drafted where they are.
Just winning an MVP is already hard enough. Like that really just goes understated. It is so hard to win an MVP now. You could say, like maybe the other quarterback play wasn't as good as, say, last year where, you have the Mahomes and the Rodgers performing at that level. But still, winning an MVP is so impressive. And I think he's I know what you mean with the Hall of Fame. I think it's called the Hall of Very Good, where, you're a really, really good player. You're definitely not going to make the Hall of Fame, but you need to be noticed because of how good you are. And the whole I don't want my quarterback to be Matt Ryan has got to – I guess I hadn't heard that, but that just sounds so ridiculous. I mean, imagine you take someone in the first round, a top 5 pick, and you were to guarantee that they would be a top 10 quarterback for a decade. Who would not take that? I mean, unless you have the number 1 pick. Like, the only person who would, I guess, if Trevor Lawrence had that career, people would say he's not as good as he was hyped up to be, but it's still an MVP, and I think he was a first team. He's gotten a or 2, probably 1 at least.
So I think because of Trevor Lawrence's pre-draft perception and the way that he's been hyped up, if he had the exact same career of Matt Ryan, they would blame that organization more than they've blamed the Atlanta Falcons. Because the Atlanta Falcons have not done a great job for Matt Ryan, given what he's been in his career. I mean, how many coordinators has he made it work with? I mean, they're all good coordinators, but he made it work with Shanahan. He made it work with Dirk Cutter. He made it work with Sarkisian. So he's made it work with multiple coordinators. How many different receivers has he had really good seasons with? Mo Sanu, Taylor Gabriel. Obviously,
I think they've surrounded him on offense pretty well. I mean, do you remember the Michael Turner days? That dude was
Michael Turner. Roddy White was excellent. Julio, Mike Jenkins was pretty good. Julio's incredible. But the bottom line is they haven't had good defenses. I would argue they haven't had good head coaches. I didn't think Mike Smith was very good. I think Dan Quinn was one of the worst coaches in the NFL, especially on defense. I don't think Dan Quinn does anything creative on defense to help their defense out. And then 3, I mean, their protection the last 5 years since Shanahan has left, the biggest problem with the Atlanta Falcons is that, their offensive line got old and now they lost Alex Mack and all of that. And they've drafted a lot of offensive linemen, But none of those offensive linemen are really panning out in the sense that they have a good offensive line right now. You know, it's getting better, but it's still not a great offensive line. And Matt Ryan, we know one of his limitations is that he's not like
mobile.
You know, Lamar Jackson moving around. He can move a little bit, but it's not like excessive amount. So overall, I 100% agree with you, B Money. He is 100% one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, the guy has been a very, very good quarterback for a very long time. And I hope Atlanta can kind of gear up and rebuild this team enough because they have a few pieces now that are looking promising. Like AJ Terrell looked promising at the end of last year. Deion Jones is criminally underrated. He's a really good player. Matt Ryan, obviously. And, you know, Calvin Ridley is another criminally underrated player. He was fantastic last season. So when you look at all of those things, I hope that they can gear up with Arthur Smith and maybe let Matt Ryan have one more chance at going deep in the playoffs.
And I did want to bring up, too, so in here, the Super Bowl loss hanging over him. I think his perception would be so much different if they did win that. And I think he played an overall good game. There was definitely times where, you know, they chose to pass the ball at the end of the game that I guess that it just wasn't, I guess, smart to do that. But you can't blame him for Devontae Freeman missing the block or the holding call when they were in field goal range or the defense just, you know, they can only be out there so long, and the offense didn't really have a chance when Patriots are having, you know, 10, 12 play drives and just letting their defense rest and just gassing the Falcons. So I thought he played a good Super Bowl. Definitely second half left a little to be desired because they lost and failed. But I think his perception would be a ton different just by the media if they would win.
That's a great point. One, I agree with you. I thought he played a really good Super Bowl. I mean, the only mistake he really made was when Dante Hightower hit him. He fumbled the ball instead of being able to hold on to it. So I guess you can blame him for that. But the other thing I was going to say is I think if he had won that Super Bowl, an MVP season and a Super Bowl MVP, I think most people would say, yeah, Matt Ryan, Hall of Fame quarterback. I think he would be a made man. And everyone would look at this second half of his career as like, it doesn't matter, you know, like nobody would be trying to replace him or anything because he's Matt Ryan, Super Bowl MVP, won a Super Bowl in Atlanta, an organization that's made 2 Super Bowls in their entire existence, you know, the organization that hasn't had a ton of success outside of with Michael Vick and now with Matt Ryan. So, and of course the Dirty Bird team in '98, but that beat the Minnesota Vikings with Chris Carter, Randy Moss, all of them. But overall, yeah, I agree with you 100%.
I mean, just think about this. He had, in the Super Bowl, he had 23 passes. He had 284 yards and 2 touchdowns. A passer rating of 144 in a Super Bowl. That is ridiculous. But, yeah, no one really talks about him playing a good game. I know that a lot of people talk about the Julio catch, which, you know, they should because Julio balled out that game. And obviously people talk about Tom Brady and James White and the Patriots defense, but I don't know, man. That was insane. And that whole Super Bowl run in general, I mean, they waxed the Packers. Now, they should have because Ladarius Gunter was on an island with Julio Jones, and, you know, you're taking advantage of that 10 out of 10 times. But, I mean, you can't really fault him for that, taking advantage. And, yeah, that season was just one of the all-time best. Unfortunately, they did collapse, and, you know, the state of Georgia is cursed when it comes to sports, and I think that's just how it's going to be forever.
Yeah. So, real quick, before we get into the receiver duos, my man Jamal, we got to get you on again, actually. Blake and I were just talking about this today. We got to do some NBA with you soon. But my man Jamal says, I agree with you guys, and I like Tannehill, but I think there's a ceiling cap on him. Not sure he's a guy that can just go win you games when things aren't going well for Henry. Am I wrong?
I think the point that I kind of agree, kind of disagree. I think the point would be like, could he be on a team that's mainly a drop back passing team? I think he could. Is that what this current Titans team is built for? No. And I think if they did build a team around him, he would be a guy that, yeah, they could win double-digit games a lot. But I think the whole ceiling cap thing is definitely true. Like, you know, if he's getting paid $36 million, would you struggle to to go far into the playoffs, I would say, yeah, probably. I mean, if the Packers are struggling with Rodgers to do it, if the Saints are doing it with Breeze, yeah, you definitely have some limitations with him getting paid, top 5, top 8 amount of cap space. But on a reasonable contract, I think you can go far in the playoffs with Tannehill, and I think they did that in 2019. Now, they ran into Mahomes and the Chiefs, who ended up winning, but there's no shame in that, and I think they put up a good fight. So,
So I think it's a fair point. Like, sure, maybe there would be limitations to that team, but how many teams go to the playoffs where there's just a true just drop the quarterback back every time? Like I think it's just Mahomes. Last year was just Mahomes, Rodgers, Josh Allen, Russell Wilson. Even Deshaun went 4-12, but Deshaun was dropping back. The quarterback was dropping back every play like that. But I would say those are like the only 5 guys that do it. Even Brady, they went to heavy 2 tight end personnel, 20, 21, 22 personnel sets, or 12 personnel, 22 personnel, and they were going deep play action and throwing the football down the field. So then it comes to like, okay, if you put him within this offense, can he maximize every single thing there is to be had? And he 100% can. Like, yes, they have a great running game, but again, it goes back to the fact that they're throwing the ball down the field off play action. This isn't Jared Goff where it's play action, bootleg, 5-yard throw to Robert Woods. This isn't Garoppolo where his ADOT is like 7 yards or 6 yards, where he's throwing the ball very near the line of scrimmage. They're pushing the ball down the football field, and every time they push it down the football field, he makes every single throw that is there to be had. So I think it's a fair point, but I think that that's where the top 5, 6 guys in the NFL separate themselves, and he's one of the 10 to 11 best guys in the NFL, and that's why he's not Josh Allen, Mahomes, Rodgers, Russell Wilson.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too, and I think that's the point to be made. Like, that's kind of what separates the Allens, the Rodgers. Like, you can just throw them in whatever situation and you have some faith because of how good they are. Now, if Tannehill was put on a team like, say, the Patriots, if he had the Patriots receivers, would he struggle to maybe get the ball down the field? Yeah, like, he's not going to be able to be a one-man wrecking crew and just, like, say, remember the Packers in 2015, I believe it was 2015, when they lost to the Cardinals, and they had Jared Abbrederis, Jeff Janis, all these random guys, and Rodgers still made it work. Like, yeah, I don't think Tannehill would be able to do that, but that's also why Rodgers has been a top 5 quarterback his whole career. But if you give Tannehill a supporting system, he's gonna more than take advantage and be a really solid quarterback. I think that's where the line is drawn between the best and that second or third tier. I guess you could say second tier of guys that they need a good supporting cast to function.
Right, and this is the distinction. If you remember one of our last streams, my man Pinor, who I see in here, asked this exact question, like how many elite guys are there? This is the exact distinction that's, in my opinion, separates the truly elite guys from the guys who have elite stats like Tannehill and Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins, but they're just, just a tad bit lower than those guys. And that's solely because, like, it's the drop back situation. I mean, you watched the Bills last year. They can't run the football. They can't run block. They can't run the football. But, like, Josh Allen, they dropped him back every play, and he would make something happen with his legs or his arm every single play. So, like, I think that's where there is a distinction between, the 5 truly special guys, and then there's everybody else. But then you have the guys like the Tannehills and the Daks that are really, really good and take advantage of everything that's there. They just can't be the drop back 65 times. Even though Dak does drop back 65 times, I'm talking about just spread it out, true drop back. There's no threat of the running game and all of that. And we're just going to throw, and win games like that. And there's only a few guys that, in my opinion, can be the ones to do that. And another guy I think that has the ability to do that, and that's why I'm so high on him and I've always been high on him, is Stafford. We've seen Stafford have seasons where the Lions don't run the football and they go to the playoffs because he's so good at dropping back, but he's never done it with the consistency as the Rodgers or the Mahomes.
Definitely. But no, that's a great question. And I think it is something that should be, maybe talked about. Like, is that the distinction to be made? And Pinor asked that last time where it was like, who are the elite quarterbacks and why? And it's basically like if everything around them's not good, can they still perform at optimal level? And for those elite guys, you would say yes. And maybe I don't think Tannehill is one of those guys, but he's still really, really good. And if you give him something to work with, he'll make it happen.
100%. Great question, Jamal.
Is the bottom line. I just want to bring this up. Shout out to Don Burr for being in the comments. You're much love the interaction. And I did want to just plug this too. So go check out. I posted with a buddy of mine, Abdul, and he has his own podcast, Shy Bears Blitz. But we ranked position groups in the NFC North. So maybe if you're a Niners fan and you want to learn more about the NFC North, I would check that out. If you want to learn more about the offenses and stuff. But yeah, Don Burr has been relentless in the comments. So shout out to Don Burr.
Yeah, and I did want to he plugged Abdul. Definitely go check out Shy Bears Blitz.
Yep.
They do a really good job. And then I saw Ben Meyerson in here. I wanted to plug him too. Blake and I went on with him recently. He knows his stuff. He does an awesome job. Make sure you're subscribed to Ben Meyerson's YouTube channel. We'll get to our receiving duos real quick. We'll just answer this question. So, Blake, have you heard of Jacob Harris? He might be the steal of the draft.
So I looked him up. I have heard the name. I haven't seen him. I never saw him play in college or anything like that. But what I do know is in the Rams, he was getting taking reps with the first team. I would have to watch more of him. I haven't seen highlights or gameplay of him, but I will get Big Killa. I will definitely check him out, and maybe we'll talk about this next time on why does he have a chance to make a big impact? Because he's a tight end on the Rams, and tight ends universally one of the hardest positions to transition from college to the NFL. You usually don't see many rookie tight ends really break out. It doesn't happen frequently. So maybe Jacob Harris could be one of those type of guys.
So I was actually just reading about Jacob Harris yesterday or today. I forgot when, but he just popped up because Sean McVay shouted out Jacob Harris saying he's been really good in camp and all of that. And apparently he's been turning heads. I mean, granted, this is OTAs and rookie mini camp. Pads aren't even on. But for this guy to be starting then, and then I saw I know they drafted him in the 4th round. But I remember reading in that article, they were talking about how he has incredible physical traits. He's 6'5", 225, and he runs a 4.4. The only tight end I truly remember starting, honestly, with the offense and stuff in minicamp and OTAs and making this type of impression was George Kittle when he first came to the Niners as a 5th-round pick. So the Killa, we appreciate the donation. I wish I could talk more about what he was at UCF and all of that, but just like Blake, I didn't watch him and all of that. Definitely something, but this is definitely a guy we need to keep an eye on because he could be the steal of the draft for the Rams. When a guy is turning heads like this in rookie minicamp and stuff, it usually means that he is really, really good.
Mm-hmm. And I think with the draft process this year too, this is something that I've seen not talked about much, but evaluating these guys is going to be way, way different than other years, in just the sense that a lot of guys skipped years, so there's less film to go around. And that skews opinions a lot. I forget his name. I think it's Sean Wade or something Wade, the cornerback.
Sean Wade, the corner from Ohio State.
He played 1 year at Ohio State, and he was a nickel corner, and he was elite at it. And he was talked about as a 1st-round pick, and he came back. He played on the outside this year.
He was terrible
and didn't really do all that great on the outside in his draft stock.
He was drafted by the Ravens. Yeah, I think in the 5th or 6th round. He fell to the 5th or 6th round. Yep. Yeah.
Watch him be a steal. I mean, if they just throw him in the nickel and he just goes back to being elite, that would just I genuinely wouldn't be surprised. Ravens seem to always be amazing, but
and then my man B Money is just too generous, too kind. Yeah. We really appreciate you, and we hope you can watch the stream. We hope you enjoy it. I mean, you really are too kind, B Money. We really appreciate it. We appreciate every single one of you, Pinor, Jamal, Don Burr, Gustavo, all you guys that have been supporting us from day one, Mike Pelton. We appreciate every single one of you. We really appreciate the support. So now let's get into why we're all here and why you guys are here. The title of this video. We're here to rank the top 5 receiving duos in the NFL. So I just wanted to lay out a distinction before this. This is not the top 5 receiver duos in the NFL. This is the top 5 receiving duos in the NFL. So tight ends are eligible. We thought about running backs. There was a running back receiver duo that we thought about.
I put mine in there, a running back and receiver duo.
I did as well. So without further ado, Blake, who is the 5th best receiving duo in the NFL in your opinion?
Well, I think before we start, we should do like shout outs to like honorable mentions or like other ones that we didn't include, but maybe in the future will be. A couple that I wanted to say were CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. Crazy they didn't make the list because I think CeeDee Lamb's the best. He was the best rookie receiver last year, and Amari Cooper's consistently like top 15 receiver. He's very streaky. You know, some games you won't see him, in other games, 10 catches, 150 yards, and that. But I thought they were really, really good duo. That kind of surprised they didn't make my list. And then the other one was Terry McLaurin and Curtis Samuel. I don't think they should have made the list, but I am excited to see what they can do, especially with Fitzmagic slinging the ball, because that'll help Scary Terry a lot because he's amazing deep ball threat, but can't really run deep routes when Alex Smith is your quarterback. So that'll be fun to watch. And then Curtis Samuel obviously came over from the Panthers, and he is amazing after the catch and in space, and he's really kind of what their team was missing. So I'm excited to see these two play together. So those were my honorable mentions. Did you have any, Vish?
Yeah, I had the same ones actually. Amari and CeeDee Lamb is definitely one. I'm with you. I thought CeeDee Lamb was the best receiver coming out of the draft. Obviously, Justin Jefferson had a better rookie season than him. And I think Brandon Ayuk also had a better rookie season than him, though I think that one's a little more up for debate depending on who you ask. But I thought CeeDee Lamb had a really good rookie season. I thought he was by far the best receiver in that draft. I loved CeeDee Lamb coming out of the draft. I wanted so badly for the 49ers to draft CeeDee Lamb at 13.
I'm so happy they didn't do that.
But they didn't draft him. But yeah, I like CeeDee Lamb a lot. That was definitely one. I'm going to say Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson is an honorable mention for me. 2 really, really good receivers, but they don't make the list. I love the shout out to Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin. I think they're going to be a great duo. DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, to me, is another one that's in the conversation. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, really, really good duo. I think that they're an honorable mention. George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, to me, that's another one that's an honorable mention. But overall, there's a lot of great duos, but narrowing it down to 5 is hard. But I think I have 5 that I'm kind of comfortable with. So without further ado, Blake, I'm going to ask you, who's the 5th best receiving duo in the NFL?
Yeah, so this was probably one of the harder. I guess this whole list was really hard, but I had DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett as my 5th best. So this for me was tough because I was comparing them with the Vikings, and I originally had the Vikings, but for me, what put the Seahawks over the top was the fact that DK Metcalf is he is a star already, but I guess the way he's talked about in his career progressions, he has the athletic profile to be a top 5 receiver in the league. And he's already been incredible with Russ. I don't see him slowing down at anytime soon. Russ still has one of the best deep balls. He is still so good down the field. And if they will have a new offensive scheme this year, and I think that'll definitely benefit them more because last year it got a little stale towards the end of the year and they slowed down a lot. But that I love DK. And then Tyler Lockett, I flip-flop with him all the time on whether I really like him a lot or whether I think he's a little overrated. But for the most part, I think he's a really, really good connection with Russ, and that's the main thing. Like, if you talk about quarterback and receiver chemistry, like, of all time, I think theirs is like got to be top 10 because for whatever reason, they make some of the most incredible plays. I think did you see the play against the Cardinals? It was back at the end zone, and Russ is just running around in the – every time Russ runs around the pocket, Lockett's ending up with the catch. It is work.
What about the Rams one 2 years ago when he rolled out to his left on Thursday Night Football? This is the one Next Gen Stats said had like a 2.4% or something chance of being completed. And he threw basically over a guy. It's a ridiculous throw rolling out to his left, and Tyler Lockett dragging both his feet. Yeah, unreal.
Yeah, so their just connection is insane. And so yeah, I think they're the fifth best. I think them and the Vikings are incredibly close. And you could almost – we'll see how Justin Jefferson does this year. But if he does what he did last year and or improves on it, you might be able to flop him. But just because of how good DK Metcalf is, I think he's clearly a top 7-8 receiver in this league. And so, yeah, that's why I have them at 5. But who did you have at 5?
So this one's going to be a little shocking because I think if you asked last year, I think most people would have this duo as unequivocally the best duo in the NFL. But I think that this duo didn't have the best season. Now it could be a little bit chemistry with quarterbacks, but they didn't have the best chemistry. And I'm going to go with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin battled injuries. Obviously, Mike Evans had another strong 1,000-yard season, but I think he had only like 1,006 yards receiving. Yep, 1,006 yards receiving. He obviously had 13 touchdowns, so he had a good receiving touchdown season. But here's where I kind of draw the distinction and why I'll get to them, Metcalf and Lockett above Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. I think Metcalf is better than both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So then it comes down to Lockett and what his impact is. And while I think Godwin had a good season for a guy that was hurt, I think Tyler Lockett had the best season of his career. He caught 100 passes for 1,054 yards and 10 touchdowns. Incredible season. I think what has hurt Tyler Lockett's statistical production in the past is the fact that Seattle hasn't been a team that's very, very true to throwing the football. They run the football a lot. I mean, one of the biggest analytical complaints about the Seattle offense over the last 5-6 years is that you have Russell Wilson and you run the ball on first down every time with Chris Carson, who's a good running back. Right. And so for that reason, I'm going to go with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin at 5. I think you have two really, really good receivers. But if we're ranking these receiving duos, especially based on what we saw most recently, which was last season, yes, they won the Super Bowl. Yes, Tom Brady had a great season with them and all of that. But individually speaking, I don't think Mike Evans is better than DK Metcalf, especially the DK Metcalf we saw last year. And I think that Tyler Lockett, based on at least last season and how he played, he vaulted himself to be right around in the same conversation as Chris Godwin. So to me, I'm going to have Seattle above these two guys. And that's why my 5th ranked receiving duo is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Okay.
With Chris Godwin and Mike Evans.
Fair enough. Yeah, I had them 4, so I guess that kind of works perfectly. I think you brought up a great point. Like, if you would have asked this last year, you'd have had them as a top 2, at worst the 3rd. But yeah, I guess Godwin being hurt's kind of put a little damper in things. Mike Evans had a little injuries too, but I still think like end of the day, what they did with Jameson and what they did with Tom was really impressive. Obviously, Mike Evans in the red zone is just a beast.
Unreal.
He is insane in the red zone. And then Godwin, just a technician. Obviously, his route running is special. And I think he's really underrated. No one really talks about Chris Godwin. And he kind of came on the scene in 2019 and really popped off. But he's a really, really good receiver. And them two combined is you get the little yin and yang of, maybe Godwin's he's not dominating completely athletically, but he's more technically gifted. And then Mike Evans is 6'5" and, got Johnny Manziel drafted in the 1st round, or part of the reason for that. But yeah, Mike Evans is a beast. He has, I think, 8 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons or something ridiculous.
It's 8. It's 8. He broke the record.
He broke Randy's record. Yeah. I mean, he's only 1,000 yards, and you can't really ask for much more than that. And I think it was weird too, like adjusting to playing with Tom, because if you remember the first half of the year, like there was a lot of miscommunication and mess ups, and they had a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. There's a lot of special guys, but these two still are some of the most talented, and that's why I have them at 4. But interesting to see how they've kind of dropped a little bit, even though I don't think they've gotten worse. Just Godwin was injured, and that's unfortunate.
So this is a perfect segue for me because I have DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett
Yeah.
here, and so I can elaborate a bit more. Obviously, right, you touched on Mike Evans, right? Incredible football player. You want to talk about a guy that hasn't been talked about enough in his career? That's Mike Evans. Mike Evans has consistently been a top 10 receiver in the NFL since probably year 2, but because he plays for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and because he played on a team that's only relevance prior to Tom Brady was Jameis Winston having a 30-30 season, he didn't get talked about enough. But Mike Evans is a baller. You talked about Godwin. Godwin's amazing underneath, and like Metcalf and Lockett, they fit with each other perfectly because you have Mike Evans, who's the conventional outside receiver that's going to beat corners and stretch teams vertically, and then you have Chris Godwin, who's going to work underneath and work right under Mike Evans, and that's how DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett are. Except there's one big distinction on why I would put Seattle above. I talked about how I think DK Metcalf is already better than Mike Evans. I think the one thing that separates DK Metcalf is he's better after the catch than Mike Evans. He is crazy after the catch. When it comes to bringing him down, he's a physical runner, and his speed is special. To me, DK Metcalf is the closest thing we've ever seen to Andre Johnson since Andre Johnson. So, like, DK Metcalf is really, really special, and I think he's a top 6-7 receiver in the NFL. Mike Evans is a top 10 receiver in the NFL, but I think DK Metcalf is a little better. But what I did want to touch on is what I think separates Lockett from Godwin is I just think Lockett's more explosive down the field than Godwin. So they both kind of offer you the same thing underneath. I think Tom and Godwin did develop a connection last year.
They did at the end of the year. They were on at the end of the year.
Right. It was a little Edelman-Tom-esque, or it'll obviously nowhere close because Tom and Edelman had the connection that Russ and Lockett have. But, it was a really, really growing connection and all of that. Right. But I think what separates Lockett from Godwin is Lockett runs 4.35. He could truly be a deep threat, and he tracks the deep ball really, really well. Now, he worked underneath a lot last year, but I think how many times have we seen over the last 4 or 5 years the scramble drill with Russ when Doug Baldwin was there? Lockett was the down the field guy.
Lockett used that. Yeah, Lockett. This is actually probably my least favorite thing about playing the Seahawks is seeing Russell Wilson just run out the pocket, and somehow it was either Doug Baldwin or Tyler Lockett they'd always make a ridiculous catch. It was you just knew it was happening. It was I hated that.
Unreal, right? And so for that reason, I think that Lockett and Godwin are both somewhere around the top 15 to 20 receivers in the NFL. And before people get really shocked, because that's a lot of receivers, there's a lot of people you have to take into account, like the DJ Moores and the Calvin Ridleys and the Terry McLaurins and all those kinds of people. Where if you start listing names, like that's where these guys kind of end up fitting. But for me, it comes down to the fact that I think Metcalf is just a little better than Mike Evans at this point. I understand how consistent and good Mike Evans has been. I just think there's a little more pop to DK Metcalf. And so for that reason, I'm with you that 4 and 5 is Seattle and Tampa Bay, but I have Seattle above Tampa Bay.
That's fair. And I guess where my distinction's made is, Mike Evans is a little worse than Metcalf. I still would take Godwin over Lockett. In my mind, I really would. I like Godwin a lot, and I think what he did with Jameis was incredible. Now, of course, Jameis is obviously throwing a ton of passes, a lot of touchdowns, a lot of picks, a lot of yards, but he is still he's really, really good. And I think the underneath stuff next year, after Tom gets a full offseason with Godwin and he doesn't get injured, I think he's going to really put people on the map, because even with the injuries, he was incredible last year. And there's just too many mouths to feed on the Buccaneers team. Anytime you have Antonio Brown as your third receiver, it starts to get a little bit unfair. And they have a lot of weapons, and Scotty Miller's taking touches from everyone, so it's a little tough. But I'm excited to see next year, and I guess we'll see how both of them do, because clearly there's one theme I think with all these guys is they do have some of the best quarterbacks in the league, and it helps a lot when you have Russell Wilson, Tom Brady, and all these type of guys throwing to you. But I guess it's my third right now.
Yeah, I can go, you can go, but it's time for number 3. Who is number 3 in your receiving duos list?
So this is going to be a weird one, I think, but I have Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara at number 3. And the main thing with so this is just hard to rank, right? Because Alvin Kamara is a running back, but he can play a little bit in the slot. I don't think he goes outside too much, maybe a little bit, but out of the backfield, his receiving is incredible. I feel like he makes some of just the most spectacular catches, and the concentration required for them is great. And maybe it's just because of his after the catch ability, but I feel like anytime he gets matched up on linebackers, there's not really any linebackers that can keep up with him. There's maybe a handful, and that's being generous. But yeah, he really can't be guarded by linebackers. I think if you remember the Cowboys game, I want to say 2018. This was kind of the game that the Drew Brees was having an MVP type of season until this Cowboys game when they got shut out. And what the Cowboys did was they doubled Michael Thomas and they doubled Alvin Kamara, and they just said anyone else can beat us, but not these two guys. And I think that just goes to show, like, if you have two guys, especially a running back that's getting doubled out of the backfield, that is incredible. And then Michael Thomas, people call him Slant Boy. I think it's a funny name, but I still think he's a top 5 receiver in the league. He was injured last year. The year before, what did he do? He had one of the statistically best seasons for a receiver ever. And so that's why I have them at 3. And it might be a bit controversial here in the comments, but I like them a lot. And we'll see what they do next year when they're both healthy.
Well, I guess I'm going to add to the controversy because even though we didn't discuss this, I have Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara as the number 3 receiving duo in the NFL still. I think, yeah, Jamal brought up DJ Moore and McCaffrey. I did actually really consider them, and then I kept them out just because I think DJ Moore is just lacking a little bit as a receiver compared to the Mike Evans, the DK Metcalfs. Yeah. But I went with Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. It starts with Michael Thomas. Again, he's still a top 5 receiver in the NFL. The slant boy nickname is hilarious, but
I love it.
The point is that no, he doesn't just run slants. He can run every route. He actually wins down the field better than more people want to give him credit for. But one of the most hidden and under talked about storylines with the New Orleans Saints the past 4 or 5 years is the fact that Drew Brees has not been a good down the field thrower, and he wasn't a willing down the field thrower. And that hurt the Saints offense a lot. And actually, in my opinion, in the playoffs, the biggest reason the New Orleans Saints of the last 4 years didn't win a Super Bowl was because Drew Brees didn't play well in the playoffs. You go back, look at the Rams game in 2018. Drew Brees did not play well in that game. You look at the 2019 Vikings game. Drew Brees did not play well. You look at last year versus Tampa Bay. Drew Brees did not play well. The Minnesota Miracle game, Drew Brees had a very poor first half. Now, he picked it up in the second half, but he played poorly in the first half. So overall, that's 4 games that they lost that have been talked about for a lot of different reasons. And for whatever reason, Drew Brees, who did not play well in all 4 of those games, just was not attributed any of the blame. So I think that's one reason. So I think that's why maybe Michael Thomas's playoff production has slipped. So that's one thing. He's obviously a top 5 receiver. He's a fantastic route runner. He's got great hands. He's incredibly tough. Until this year, he was very durable. He used to play every game, and he would give you 9 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown, something like that every single game. Alvin Kamara is a receiving weapon. Fantastic route runner. Great after the catch. Amazing balance. You brought up the Dallas game. What about the game versus your Packers this year when I think Alvin Kamara had 2 long touchdowns off screens? Alvin Kamara is incredible after the catch. I think that he's an absolute matchup nightmare. And it's because I think the thing with duo is that we're also talking about how these 2 players complement each other. And when you have an offensive genius like Sean Payton, and when he's able to put Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas on the same side, and it becomes such a mismatch nightmare for a defense because it's very difficult to double 2 guys on the same side. Just mathematically, it makes no sense because then you're forfeiting coverage everywhere else. So it's very difficult to do that. And because of that, I think the way Camara and Michael Thomas complement each other is they complement each other in a better way than Godwin and Evans or Lockett and Metcalf, even though those 2 guys are incredible individual players. So for that reason, I think that Camara and Michael Thomas are the 3rd best receiving duo in the NFL. Shocking that I'm actually shocked that we both had this because I expected you to have them lower on this list or if not on this list, but I think it's funny that we both have them 3.
And I guess it's a fair point because I guess a lot of Kamara's receiving production maybe isn't off killing people on routes, and it's more of him after the catch, and that's a fair statement. But if you have 2 guys that you want as a receiving duo, one of them's a top 5 receiver in Thomas, but not like I said, like linebackers cannot really keep up with Kamara, and Drew Brees was peppery. He would just pepper Kamara, and being ability after the catch is part of being a receiver, being able to create. And so that's where you do have to factor them in there more so than other guys who maybe aren't as special as he is after the catch. Because after the catch, I don't know how many people are better than Alvin Kamara. There's not too many.
Forget after the catch, his route running is wildly underrated. I've seen Camara beat corners. I've seen Camara beat safeties. I've seen Camara beat linebackers on conventional routes. I've seen him line up as a split end. I've seen him line up as a flanker. I've seen him line up in the slot. I've seen him do every single thing. He is an absolute receiving weapon. Now, the comment section is having a nice debate on Camara versus McCaffrey. And I think maybe as a receiver, I would give that edge to McCaffrey.
I'd go McCaffrey.
The 1,000 season, and I would give it to McCaffrey, though it's very close. The distinction here is I love DJ Moore. I think when we do our underrated receivers, and after we did our underrated quarterbacks today, I will probably say DJ Moore as my underrated receiver. He's not as good as Michael Thomas. And that's where the distinction to me gets made.
Not even close.
Because I think Michael Thomas is better than Mike Evans. I think Michael Thomas is better than DK Metcalf, who I both think are top 7-8 receivers in the NFL. And then when you add in Camara, who I think is borderline, at worst, the second best receiving back in the NFL, you consider how they're used, how they complement each other. To me, it makes total sense as to why they're the 3rd best receiving duo in the NFL.
And this list is kind of weird too, right? Because we're going receiving duos, not receiver duos. Because if it was receiver duos, like Kelsey and Hill wouldn't be on there because Kelsey's a tight end, and we wouldn't have mentioned George Kittle, and we wouldn't have mentioned Camara. But it adds another element of just, I think, complexity when you do have to factor in, this guy's a tight end and he's not going up against corners every play. He could be going up against the safety, or this guy's a running back. He's not going up against Jalen Ramsey. He's going up against, your linebackers or your safeties, or in some positions corner, because you need someone who can guard him. And Kamara is just that special.
Yeah, and the thing, right, we're talking about just your ability as a receiver, right? So you brought that up perfectly. I think that's the perfect point. Like, I understand that Camara, isn't the receiver that, say, Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson are as raw receivers.
Right.
But in terms of his ability to produce as a receiver, he produces damn near close to what they produce. So, like, then when you look at what Michael Thomas produces and all of that, to me, it just, I don't know. The comment section, my guys are taking it a little hard, but sorry, guys. I guess Blake and I see eye to eye on this one. The 3rd best receiving duo in the NFL, in our opinion, is Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara.
Vish, who did you have at 2?
Who I had at 2? To me, 2 and 1 was the easiest 2 things to list on this list. 2 is A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. And the only reason I would say Julio Jones and A.J. Brown aren't 1, because in terms of raw talent, I think you can make the argument that they're 1. It's just that we haven't seen them do it as a duo yet. But to me, you're talking Julio Jones, top 5 receiver in the NFL. You're talking A.J. Brown, top 8, top 7 receiver in the NFL. You're talking 2 super studs. We've talked a lot about Ryan Tannehill at the top of this show. We both really like Ryan. We both really like Ryan Tannehill. We both think he's a really good quarterback. And then you add in A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. They're both complete receivers. They're both great after the catch. They're both great route runners. Julio, in my opinion, a little better than A.J. Brown. They're both explosive athletes. They're both really strong. A.J. Brown is an amazing player after the catch. I think it's so underrated because, him and Debo came out in the same draft. I think A.J. Brown is almost as good as Debo after the catch, honestly. I think he's as physical. I think he's as good at breaking tackles. I think he's as strong a runner. He just does it in a different fashion because he's not getting the ball 2 yards behind the line of scrimmage. He's getting the ball 20 yards in front of the line of scrimmage. And then how many times have we seen the around the 40-yard line, the Titans take a shot, they go play action. Tannehill rips a 20-yard crosser, and A.J. Brown throws the corner down and just beats the safety's angle for a touchdown. We see that too many times. Julio Jones, I think that people need to stop saying Julio Jones is washed up. I'm so sick
That's
of
wild.
seeing that.
That's wild.
He was insane last year when he did play. Yes, his lower body, he is managing injuries and all of that. But to me, like Jamal put it perfectly, they're two legitimate receiver ones. A.J. Brown was a bona fide top 6-7 receiver in the NFL last year. He was a baller, and he was doing it while injured. Julio Jones, I mean, until last year, like there was probably zero argument for anybody else as the best receiver in the NFL or last 2 years since Tyreek Hill's emergence in my mind. So from that standpoint, like to me, this is a no-brainer. The only reason they're not one is just because we haven't seen it do it together, and there's two super freaks that will be one, in my opinion. But Jesus Christ, like these are two special football players. And yeah, Julio Jones, A.J. Brown, they're going to kill it next season.
Yeah, so this was one I kind of went back and forth on. This was tough for me because I think you mentioned it, right? Like just raw ability and playmaking, you could make the argument Julio and A.J. Brown is better because A.J. Brown is way more physically dominant than Kelsey. But I just think Hill and Kelsey are just too good. But I think Hill's probably the best receiver, and I think Kelsey's one or two best tight end. So in that case, like, how can I have someone above them? So I had A.J. Brown and Julio here. Julio, yeah, top 5, top 6. You know, somewhere there's like 5 or 6 guys that I think are the tier 1, and he's in there somewhere. Hard to rank him outside of that, but yeah. Julio's route running is still great. Even nursing injuries, he can play. And then A.J. Brown, I don't know if he's a top 7 or 8 receiver yet. I don't think he is. He is very physically dominant and all that, but he has only had like combined, he's had 1,000 yards and 1,075 yards. Now I know stats are on everything, but that's what he did his first 2 years. And maybe I think they would be a lot better depending on the offense because they don't throw the ball. They'll run 30 times a game with Derrick Henry. So his stats would be better if he was in an offense that was maybe more pass friendly or pass happy, I guess you could say. Like imagine him on a team like the Texans where they're losing by double digits the whole game and they're just constantly throwing. Yeah, right. I mean, they would probably have like 1,500 yards, 1,600 yards. And maybe that's a little bit why, but A.J. Brown, I think I'd rather have Kelsey than A.J. Brown. Like, I don't think that's a controversial thing to say, but you can make an argument that, you know, A.J. Brown's ability after the catch is elite. I know you saw the Ravens game where Humphrey, Peters, everyone's trying to tackle him and he's just big bodying everyone. And then down the field, making catches in traffic is nuts. I feel like a lot of his catches, like, you know, on the bombs from Tannehill, there's like a guy that's breathing down his neck and he'll just go up and get it or pull his hands at the last second and snag it. So he's just incredible. And then, yeah, Julio, you don't really need to say much more than he's a top 5 to 6 receiver. The whole wash thing is, yeah, that's crazy. I don't know about all that. I get the injuries. I understand the injury. I think it's an issue because if you remember, I feel like Julio Jones is on the injury report every week and he's questionable, but he'll just play because it's Julio Jones, and he needs to be out there. And then one more thing I wanted to say, but I don't know if I've even talked to you about this, Vish. Did you know about the A.J. Brown like knee surgery thing that came out right after the season?
Yeah. That's what I wanted to say.
We didn't even mention that, right? But so after week 2, he underwent surgery on both of his knees, and he could have realistically been ruled out for the season. He was playing on knees that most people wouldn't have even played on. They would have just sat out and not played. And he didn't even want this information to go public. He was off of meds after the surgery, and I think started going on social media accidentally because he was, he just had surgery. So he was under pain meds, and he didn't mean to do that. But I don't know if this was true or not, but he was like, he would go around in a wheelchair at times because he just like couldn't walk, which, I mean, that's unbelievable. Putting up, you wouldn't even know that he was that injured considering how he played. So I think that's just a further testament to how good he is.
Yeah. So a couple things I wanted to touch on before we wanted to move to one. I think you had your reasons why these two guys aren't one, and I talked about it a little briefly just in terms of how good the other two are. But I do want to touch on a couple of things too, just before we move on. One, I think you're right about AJ Brown. I think I was a little over emphatic when I said, top 7 to 8 receiver. If you really hash it out, to me, he's maybe between like
Somewhere
9 and 12, 9 and 12,
somewhere
somewhere
up there,
there. So
yeah.
still like and receiver one, an elite player. Just there's so many names out there. There's like Devontae Adams and Keenan Allen, and there's a
Yeah,
lot of guys. Stephon Diggs,
how do you like
right?
Keenan Allen's a name, like how do you rank this guy compared to AJ? They're just so different. They're good at different
Right.
stuff, but they're both incredible.
Stephon Diggs. And here's my other thing with AJ Brown. And this is something that two things I think bear this out with AJ Brown. One, there's this thing called reception perception. I sent you the link. My man Jason Aponte plugged me with this. And there's something I noticed with AJ Brown in his first 2 seasons in the NFL, and reception perception does a really good job of charting this. So AJ Brown is really, really good at running crossers. He's really, really good at running digs. He's really good at running posts. Any sort of in-breaking route, AJ Brown is elite at. He's not that great at running out-breaking routes as much. And the reception perception bears that out. Is AJ Brown's Matt Harmon, I think he's the one who charted it. AJ Brown's statistical production when it comes to out-breaking routes in 2020 or just out routes was not as good as in routes. So, for example, on a dig, AJ Brown had success 78.1% of the time. That is above league average. On an out route, AJ Brown was successful 69.2% of the time. Now, you might think 69.2% of the time, only 9% less than less than the dig, but this was way less than league average. So when you look at all of those things, and that to me, there are some things with AJ Brown that isn't as complete as the two guys in front in Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey. We know that Julio Jones is as complete a football player as we've seen. He's a future first ballot Hall of Fame receiver. There shouldn't be questions about that. And AJ Brown to me is right there as the top 10 receivers in the NFL, and he's really, really good. I don't want that to be lost here. I'm a big AJ Brown fan. But when you're parsing and you're asking the question, are these two guys better than Tyreek Hill, who I think is the best wide receiver in the NFL, and then, like you said, Travis Kelsey is a top 1 or 2 tight end, there's a couple of things there as to why I would say no.
So, yeah, you had the Chiefs number 1, Hill and Kelsey. Why'd you have them there? I mean, we both had them there, but you can go first.
Yeah, so I think we both kind of touched on it while trying to argue for why Brown and Julio are 2, but it's pretty simple. It's the best receiver in the NFL. It's the best receiving tight end in the NFL. Tyreek Hill, to me, is the best offensive weapon in the NFL. He is incredible on jet sweeps. He scares teams when he goes in motion. He's a very underratedly good route runner. He's a very underrated contested catch receiver because his hops make him have a much bigger catch radius than his actual size makes you think that he has. So the perception is that he's this down the field threat, but he's a little Antonio Brownish where he can really make a lot of catches in tight spaces and stuff. We know about his game-breaking speed. He's very fast. But I think what makes Tyreek Hill more special than other fast guys in NFL history is that he's maintains his speed while being very agile and explosive and really strong in terms of his legs. If you look at Tyreek Hill's legs, they are big for a guy that fast. Compared to like Deshaun Jackson, he's got thick legs, and that helps him because he's a really, really explosive after the catch guy. Like Tyreek Hill can not only beat you on an 80-yard touchdown where Mahomes throws it up, he can also do the thing where, that little push pass that Chip Kelly brought into play in the NFL where it's the ultimate stat pad for quarterbacks because it's a very easy high percentage completion. But it's basically turning the jet sweep into a low risk play because you can't fumble, because if you fumble, it's an incomplete pass. So he can take that 80 yards for a touchdown. There's not that many receivers that can do that. To me, he threatens defenses more than any other receiver in the NFL. That's why I think he's the best receiver. And then Travis Kelsey is just one of the most versatile offensive weapons in the NFL. He's unbelievable in the red zone. He's unbelievable at finding space versus zone coverage. He's unbelievable versus man coverage. He's great after the catch. He can line up as inline as your tight end. He can line up as your X receiver. He can line up as your Z receiver. He can line up as your slot receiver. You can do anything with him, and the guy just finds ways to get open. One of the Chiefs' best formations is a 3-by-1 with Travis Kelsey as the single receiver on the lone side, and they just isolate him and allow him to get open, and he wins one-on-one against elite corners and stuff. They're both unbelievable. To me, when you add in Patrick Mahomes, which is obviously a huge thing because it's the best quarterback in the NFL, but when you look at the fact that they have the best receiving duo in the NFL, like two guys that are just elite by themselves, and you add them together, it's to me just unbelievable. I think that I would like to say that I thought about this harder and, people made this a conversation, but at the end of the day, to me, it really wasn't that close. These two guys are by far the best receiving duo.
Interesting. Yeah, so I have them there too. I think with Tyreek Hill, you mentioned the route running. He wasn't that great of a route runner his first year. He was more of just, get this dude in open space and he's going to kill teams because he's that fast. But now he's one of the best route runners, but I just don't feel that really gets talked about enough because you need more than just speed. Now, speed helps. Like, a guy like Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who's not a good route runner, he's really fast and in a straight line. Yeah, he'll beat you from time to time, but Tyreek Hill can beat you on pretty much any route, it seems. And that's why I also agree with you. I think he's the best receiver in the league with just, I don't know if it's like, there's no stat on it, obviously, but just like the fear factor that Tyreek Hill can go yard any single play, and he doesn't need much help from anyone else besides a decently accurate pass is just kind of a scary thought. If you remember Mahomes' not first playoff game, but the AFC Championship game against the Patriots, and the Chiefs struggled in the first half, and in the second half, Tyreek Hill just started going nuclear because, they were doing everything. They were doubling him frequently and putting Gilmore on him and all that, but just didn't matter because he was so fast and he would just get over the top and score. So, yeah, I think Tyreek Hill is also the best receiver. And then Kelsey, for me, he was hard to grade, right? Because I feel like he is the best or second best tight end. I don't know how good he is after the catch. That's where I would dock him a little bit. Now, he's not like Jimmy Graham where, he's getting tackled on the first touch, but he can break tackles and stuff, but he's not obviously the fastest. He is more of like the prototypical tight end. That's where I had trouble comparing him with someone like A.J. Brown because let's face it, Kelsey has benefited a lot from being with Mahomes, and Mahomes benefits a lot from being with Kelsey. But if you had A.J. Brown in an offense with Mahomes and he was finding holes similar to Kelsey does, imagine how dominant that would be after the catch. I think that would be extraordinarily better, and it's hard to grade because you don't see A.J. Brown in that offense. But yeah, I'm with you with Kelsey and Hill at one. I think I was pretty close having the Titans there just because comparing Kelsey and A.J. Brown, they're just very different types of pass catchers. But yeah, Kelsey is about as dominant as you get for a tight end. And if you need any further proof, just watch what he did to the Texans safeties in the divisional round of 2019, I want to say. I think he had 150 yards, and they were doubling him, and he was still getting wide open quite frequently. So he's awesome. And yeah, the Chiefs offense, Mahomes, and then debatably the best receiver duo, and then Andy Reid on top of it. It's not a surprise they won a Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's formidable. I think the crazy thing is that I think the guys around these guys actually get overrated a ton. Like Sammy Watkins was basically MIA the last 2 years. Byron Pringle, I don't think he's very good. McCole Hardman, to me, is not as good as what people expected when they drafted him. He's a good kick returner. He's a good punt returner. He is not a great receiver. But because they have these two guys in Mahomes, they really make it happen. I think just because they have Mahomes, you shouldn't understate how special both of these guys are. Like Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey both had really, really good seasons with Alex Smith at quarterback in 2017. Travis Kelsey had multiple good seasons with Alex Smith. Tyreek Hill, you mentioned, wasn't the greatest route runner as a rookie, improved a lot in his second year, that first year with Alex Smith, and he's just gotten better exponentially to the point where I think you and I agree he's the best receiver in the NFL because he is an underrated route runner, but he's a really good one. His contested catches, I catch in traffic. I think both of those things are very underrated and very under talked about. His ability to go up and get the ball. I mean, week 1 versus the Jaguars 2 years ago, this was when the Jaguars got Nick Foles. And if you remember, people thought the Jaguars defense was going to be back to the 2017 Jaguars defense. And Jalen Ramsey played Tyreek Hill pretty well in that game. But I think their first touchdown, Mahomes threw a bomb and Tyreek Hill out-jumped 2 people and caught it in the end zone. It might not have been the Jaguars game. It might have been a different game. But he jumps 40 inches. He's incredible. So, yeah, for all those reasons, to me, yeah, this is the best receiving duo in the NFL.
But yeah, I think that was our whole list. I guess just to recap, my 5 was at 5 I had DK, I had Metcalf and Lockett. 4 I had Evans, Godwin. 3 Thomas, Camara. 2 Julio and AJ Brown, and then 1 Hill and Kelsey. And yours was similar. I think you had like a couple different than mine, right?
Yeah, we had the same, except I had the Tampa Bay duo of Godwin and Evans at 5. I had Metcalf and Lockett at 4. And then I had Camara, Thomas 3, Julio, AJ Brown 2, and then Travis Kelsey, Tyreek Hill 1.
Yeah. So it's been an hour and a half, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, thank you guys for coming in and asking good questions. I know in the future we're going to try to do another Q&A soon, so get some questions ready for that. And
yeah, there were a lot of really
good
questions
today, but
right,
really
it went a little while. But yeah, there were a lot of really good questions in here today that we were reading. We just couldn't get to them just based on timing. But I know like Jamal, Pinor, all of you guys asked really great questions. We'll do a special Q&A in this upcoming week so we can answer all of these really good questions and get to them. But yeah, thank you everybody for joining. We appreciate all of your support. We really do. And please subscribe. Please comment down below on your top 5 receiving duo, and we'll be there next time.
Yeah, and we've actually gone on with Amin before, so I'm sure we'll do another show with Amin and Average Sports Kid, and then I know we were on with Ben Meyerson too. So check him out and check out that stream. I'm sure. Of course, we love having the other Niners media YouTubers on here too. So that'll be coming more in the future.
And speaking of Ben Meyerson, we'll actually be posting a few things from the stream we did from his channel on our YouTube channel. So definitely check it out when we do post it, and check out Ben's YouTube. Thank you guys for your support once again. Comment down below on your top 5 receiving duo. We appreciate everything. We appreciate all the support, and we will see you next time.